There's something profoundly unsettling about betrayal. It's not just the act itself, but the message it sends. That trust, loyalty, and goodness can be discarded when they are no longer convenient. When you betray a good soul, you don't just wound them, you diminish yourself. You take something sacred, a bond forged in trust, and you break it for reasons that often seem trivial in hindsight. And the price? It's immeasurable. It haunts the betrayer in ways they rarely admit, and it leaves the betrayed questioning the very foundation of their kindness. Betrayal is one of the oldest stories told by humanity, etched into our collective psyche as a cautionary tale, a mirror reflecting our darker impulses. To betray a good soul is to commit a unique transgression. It's not just a mistake, it's an act of willful disregard for the essence of what makes us human: our ability to trust, to bond, to believe in one another. A good soul is rare. It is not just someone who acts in kindness, but someone whose very existence is a testament to the possibilities of integrity and compassion in a chaotic, often unforgiving world. Betrayal of such a person carries a weight unlike any other, because it's not only an attack on them, it's an affront to the fragile hope that goodness can endure. When you betray someone good, you may justify it in the moment. You tell yourself stories to make it seem reasonable, even necessary. Perhaps it's a matter of convenience or self-preservation. Maybe it's rooted in envy, a deep-seated resentment of their virtues because they shine a light on your shortcomings. But here's the truth. Betrayal is rarely about the other person. It's a revelation of who you are. It exposes your weaknesses, your fears, and your inability to confront them honestly. You might think you're simply escaping a difficult situation or pursuing what you deserve, but what you're truly doing is diminishing yourself. The pain of betrayal for the one who is good cannot be overstated. It's a wound that strikes at their core, not because they lack resilience, but because their goodness is intertwined with their openness to trust. They don't build walls, they extend bridges. They don't calculate every interaction for personal gain. They approach others with sincerity. And when such trust is shattered, it leaves a scar that doesn't fade easily. A betrayed good soul begins to question their judgment, their choices, and even their nature. They wonder if their goodness is a flaw, if their openness is a weakness. And this is the great tragedy of betrayal. It doesn't just harm, it corrupts. For the betrayer, the cost is far deeper, even if it is not immediately felt. It lodges itself within the subconscious, manifesting as guilt, shame, and a gnawing sense of loss. You cannot betray goodness and remain unscathed. You carry the weight of it forward into every new relationship, every opportunity for trust, because deep down you know what you're capable of. You've seen yourself compromise the very values that make life worth living, and while the world may not judge you for it, your own conscience will never let you fully forget. There is a ripple effect to betrayal that extends far beyond the immediate act. When a good soul is betrayed, their ability to extend trust to others is diminished. They become more guarded, more hesitant. This in turn affects the people around them, their friends, family, colleagues. The betrayal of one can ripple through a community, eroding the collective sense of safety and connection. It creates a world where everyone is a little more cautious, a little more cynical. This is the real cost of betrayal. It weakens the very fabric of society, which is built on the fragile foundation of trust and mutual respect. And yet, despite this devastation, there is hope. Betrayal, as dark and destructive as it is, can also be a crucible for growth for both the betrayed and the betrayer. The one who has been hurt must decide whether to let their pain close them off or to use it as a source of strength, a way to refine their boundaries and understand their worth. They can choose to remain good but wise, to balance openness with discernment. And the betrayer? Their redemption lies in the acknowledgement of their failure, in the courage to face their guilt and make amends. It is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one if they are ever to reclaim their integrity. We must learn to protect the good souls among us. They are not naive, they are courageous. It takes strength to trust, to love, to believe in others when the world often seems to reward selfishness and deceit. When we encounter such people, our duty is not to take advantage of their openness, but to honor it. It is a sacred responsibility because their goodness elevates us all. At the same time, we must confront our own capacity for betrayal, to recognize the temptations and rationalizations that lead us down that dark path. By doing so, we build a foundation of integrity within ourselves, one that can withstand the pressures of life and remain true to the values that make us human. In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, this commitment to loyalty, trust, and goodness is nothing less than revolutionary. And it starts with a choice to protect, rather than exploit, the good souls in our lives. There is a profound psychological and moral burden carried by those who betray a good soul, though they often fail to grasp it in the moment. Betrayal is not merely an act of breaking trust. It is a deliberate fracturing of the foundation upon which human relationships are built. When someone with a pure heart, someone who gives without expecting, someone who sees the best in you despite your flaws, becomes the target of betrayal, it reveals more about the betrayer than it ever does about the betrayed. It is a declaration that their internal chaos has overwhelmed their capacity to honor what is good and noble. To betray someone who has shown you kindness, understanding, and vulnerability is to declare war on your own sense of decency. You might justify it with elaborate stories, convincing yourself that you were compelled by circumstance, that it was inevitable, or that it somehow serves a greater good. But deep down, beneath the layers of rationalization, lies the truth. You chose to act against what you knew to be right. You allowed fear, greed, or envy to dictate your actions, and in doing so, you violated not only the trust of another, but the trust you should have in yourself. The world is not indifferent to betrayal. The moral fabric of society relies on the trust between individuals. Every betrayal erodes that fabric, making it harder for anyone to believe in the goodness of others. When a good soul is hurt, their ability to remain open, to extend trust, is challenged. They question their judgment, their ideals, and even their value. What you might see as a singular act of self-preservation or convenience becomes a ripple that extends into the lives of countless others. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone feels the impact of a betrayal because it reinforces a narrative that trust is a weakness, that vulnerability leads to pain. And yet, the cost to the betrayer is often greater. The betrayed can rebuild, even if it takes time. They can grow stronger, wiser, and more discerning. But the betrayer is left with the knowledge of what they've done, a stain on their conscience that cannot be easily erased. The human psyche is not built to exist in contradiction for long. When you act against your own values, against the moral compass that guides you, you create an inner conflict that festers. You might bury it for a while, distract yourself with work, relationships, or pleasures, but it will surface. It always does. There is no escaping the truth of who you are, especially when you've betrayed someone who represents what you could aspire to be. A good soul is not weak or naive. They are courageous in their authenticity. Their goodness is not a flaw, but a deliberate choice in a world that often rewards cynicism and manipulation. To betray such a person is to reject the possibility of being better yourself. It is to surrender to the darker impulses within you, to let them dictate your actions instead of striving for the higher ideals that give life meaning. What makes betrayal particularly devastating is that it often comes from those closest to us. It is not the stranger or the casual acquaintance who has the power to hurt us most deeply. It is the friend, the partner, the family member, the ones we have let into our inner world, the ones we have trusted with our vulnerabilities. Betrayal from them feels like an attack on our very identity because it challenges the narrative we've built about who we are and who they are in our lives. It forces us to question not only their integrity but our own judgment. For the betrayed, the journey forward is one of resilience and self-discovery. They must navigate the pain, the anger, and the disillusionment, but they must also decide what kind of person they want to be in the aftermath. Do they allow the betrayal to harden them, to close them off from the possibility of trust and connection? Or do they use it as an opportunity to refine their boundaries, to learn to protect themselves without losing the essence of who they are? This is not an easy path, but it is the path of growth. For the betrayer, the path to redemption is even steeper. It begins with acknowledgement not just to the one they've hurt, but to themselves. It requires a willingness to face the discomfort of guilt and the courage to seek forgiveness. But forgiveness is not something you can demand or expect. It is something you earn through consistent actions, through proving that you are capable of change. And even then, the scars remain, a reminder of what was lost and what must never be repeated. The betrayal of a good soul is not an isolated act. It is a thread in the larger tapestry of human relationships, a thread that, when pulled, weakens the whole. But it is also a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront the darkness within and choose a different path. It is a test of character, both for the one who has been hurt and for the one who has done the hurting. And in that test lies the possibility of transformation, the chance to become something more than what we were. The betrayal of a good soul is a moment that echoes through the chambers of your existence, affecting every facet of who you are and what you stand for. It's not simply an act that happens in isolation. It is a disruption of the moral equilibrium that binds people together. To betray someone who has acted in good faith, who has offered their trust, their time, and their heart, is to betray the better parts of yourself. And if you can't face that truth, it will haunt you, whether you acknowledge it or not. The consequences of such actions extend beyond the immediate pain inflicted on the other person. They resonate within you, shaping your character and the trajectory of your life. When you hurt someone who has shown you goodness, you violate not just a social contract, but an unspoken spiritual law that governs human relationships. This law demands reciprocity, integrity, and respect for the vulnerable parts of another person. It's what enables people to coexist, to build families, communities, and even civilizations. Betrayal strikes at the heart of this foundation. It says, "I value my immediate desires or fears more than I value the trust you placed in me." Such a statement, whether spoken aloud or through action, doesn't only fracture the bond between you and the other person. It damages the invisible thread of morality that holds society together. But what does this betrayal cost the betrayer? This is the question most people avoid because it's far easier to focus on the damage done to the betrayed. Yet the betrayer pays a price too, and it is often a heavier, more enduring one. The immediate gratification or escape from responsibility that betrayal might seem to offer is fleeting. What remains is the knowledge of what you've done. You may rationalize it, excuse it, or bury it under layers of denial, but the shadow of your actions follows you. It surfaces in moments of quiet reflection, in dreams, and in the way you perceive yourself. It distorts your relationships with others and, most importantly, with yourself. There's a fundamental difference between someone who betrays because they are overwhelmed by circumstances and someone who betrays as a calculated act. But the end result is often the same, a loss of self-respect. Because deep down you know that you have acted in a way that is beneath your potential. You know that you have chosen expediency over principle, comfort over courage, and selfishness over selflessness. That knowledge doesn't just go away. It becomes a part of you, shaping how you see yourself and how others see you. For the one who has been betrayed, the pain is immediate and sharp. It's a searing wound that calls into question their judgment, their worth, and their ability to trust again. But with time, that wound can heal. They can rebuild themselves, often becoming stronger and more resilient in the process. They can learn to set boundaries, to recognize red flags, and to protect their own dignity without losing the capacity for trust and connection. This is not to say that the path is easy. It's fraught with challenges, moments of despair, and the temptation to harden one's heart entirely. But the potential for growth is there, and many find a way to seize it. For the betrayer, the path to redemption is far less straightforward. It requires an unflinching look at the truth of what they've done. It requires humility, the willingness to admit fault, and the courage to seek forgiveness. But forgiveness, when it comes, is not a reset button. It doesn't erase the past or absolve you of the responsibility to change. True redemption comes not from being forgiven, but from becoming someone who would never commit such an act again. It's a long, difficult road, and not everyone is willing to walk it. When a good soul is betrayed, it's not just a loss for the individuals involved, it's a loss for humanity as a whole. Goodness is rare, and it is fragile. It requires nurturing and protection, not just by the individual who possesses it, but by those around them. To harm someone who embodies goodness is to strike at the very qualities that make life meaningful. It is to say, whether intentionally or not, that such qualities are expendable in the face of personal convenience or gain. But here's the paradox. Goodness is also incredibly resilient. It can survive betrayal, rejection, and cruelty. It may falter and doubt itself, but it has the capacity to rise again, often stronger than before. This is why betraying a good soul is ultimately a failure of the betrayer, not the betrayed. It is the betrayer who loses the opportunity to align themselves with something noble and true. It is the betrayer who must live with the knowledge that they have acted against their better nature. Betrayal is a test not just for the one who is betrayed, but for the one who betrays. It asks us who we are, what we value, and what kind of person we want to be. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that we might rather ignore, and it offers us a choice to continue down the path of self-deception and moral compromise, or to face the truth and strive for something better. This choice is never easy, but it is always there, waiting for us to make it. Betrayal is not an isolated event, nor is it a singular act that disappears into the void once it occurs. Instead, it is a ripple in the fabric of human relationships, a disruption that extends far beyond the moment of its commission. When we betray someone, particularly someone who embodies goodness and trust, we betray not only them but also the ideals that hold us together as human beings. It's an act that reveals the fragility of trust and the weight of the moral obligations we owe to one another. And for the one who commits the betrayal, the consequences are often deeper and more far-reaching than they could have ever anticipated. To betray a good soul is to sever a bond that was built on the foundation of vulnerability and mutual respect. Goodness in a person isn't just about kindness or generosity. It's about their willingness to open themselves up to others, to believe in the inherent decency of people, and to act in ways that reflect those values. When you betray someone like that, you are attacking their worldview. You are saying, intentionally or otherwise, that their faith in you was misplaced, that their goodness is a weakness rather than a strength. This is a profoundly destructive message to send, not only to the person you've wronged, but also to yourself. When we harm others, particularly those who have done us no wrong, we are forced to grapple with the dissonance between our actions and our sense of self. Most people like to think of themselves as good, or at least as trying to be good. But betrayal calls that belief into question. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that we are capable of inflicting harm, even on those who least deserve it. This recognition can be deeply unsettling, and many people respond by trying to rationalize their behavior, blaming circumstances, or even the person they've hurt, rather than facing the truth. But denial does not erase the impact of our actions. The consequences of betrayal are not limited to the immediate fallout. They linger, shaping our relationships and our sense of self in ways that can be difficult to fully understand. When we betray someone, we damage not only their ability to trust us, but also their ability to trust others. This is especially true when the person betrayed is someone who naturally sees the good in people. Betrayal teaches them to be wary, to guard themselves against future pain. It hardens them in ways that can make it more difficult for them to connect with others or to extend the same generosity of spirit they once offered so freely. For the betrayer, the damage is often more insidious. It's easy to underestimate the toll that guilt and shame can take on a person. These emotions, while uncomfortable, serve an important purpose. They are signals from our conscience, urging us to reflect on our actions and make amends. But if ignored or suppressed, they can fester, leading to a sense of disconnection from oneself and others. Over time, this can manifest as a deep-seated sense of unworthiness or a persistent fear of being exposed for who we really are. The irony is that the very act of betraying someone often stems from a place of insecurity or fear. People betray others because they are afraid of being vulnerable, of facing their own shortcomings, or of dealing with the consequences of their actions. But in trying to avoid these things, they only create more pain for themselves and for others. Betrayal doesn't solve problems, it amplifies them. It creates a cycle of hurt and mistrust that can be incredibly difficult to break. Yet, within this darkness, there is also an opportunity for growth. Betrayal, as painful as it is, can serve as a wake-up call. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that we might prefer to ignore. It challenges us to take responsibility for our actions and to strive to be better. This is not an easy path, and many people resist it. They cling to their justifications, their excuses, and their narratives of victimhood, rather than facing the hard truths about themselves. But for those who are willing to do the work, the rewards can be profound. To truly reckon with betrayal, we must start by acknowledging the harm we've caused. This requires humility and courage, as well as a willingness to listen to the perspective of the person we've hurt. It means setting aside our defensiveness and our need to be right in order to fully understand the impact of our actions. Only then can we begin to make amends, not just through words, but through meaningful changes in our behavior. Making amends is not just about seeking forgiveness from the person we've wronged, it's also about rebuilding our own sense of integrity. It's about proving to ourselves, through our actions, that we are capable of living up to our values. This is a process that takes time and effort, but it is ultimately what allows us to move forward. Without it, we remain trapped in the shadow of our past mistakes, unable to fully embrace the possibilities of the present and the future. The price of betrayal is not just the loss of trust or the pain inflicted on another person. It is the loss of our own sense of self-worth and moral clarity. It is the burden of knowing that we have acted against our better nature and the challenge of finding our way back to a place of alignment with our values. But if we are willing to face this challenge, to take responsibility for our actions and commit to change, we can emerge from the experience stronger and more grounded. We can rebuild not only our relationships with others, but also our relationship with ourselves. This is the real work of redemption, and it is work that is worth doing. When a person is betrayed, especially by someone they trust deeply, the aftermath often feels like standing at the edge of an emotional abyss. The act of betrayal is not merely a violation of trust. It is a dismantling of the unspoken agreements that hold human connections together. These agreements built on honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect are not just social niceties. They are the foundation of our ability to function as individuals within a collective. When these foundations are shaken, it's as though the very ground beneath us crumbles. And this collapse is most profoundly felt when the betrayal is committed against someone who has cultivated a good and honorable soul. A good soul is not just a person who adheres to societal norms or performs kind acts for recognition. It is someone who has committed to a life of integrity, who operates with a clear sense of purpose, and who seeks to elevate others through their presence and actions. When such a person is betrayed, the damage is not confined to them alone. The betrayal reverberates outward, affecting not only their worldview, but also the moral fabric of the relationships they share with others. Betraying someone like this is not a casual misstep. It is an act that carries profound consequences for both the victim and the betrayer. For the one who commits the betrayal, the immediate impact may be obscured by rationalizations or excuses. They might justify their actions as necessary or inevitable, convincing themselves that their choices were born out of circumstance rather than intent. But the truth is more complex. To betray is to consciously or unconsciously prioritize one's desires, fears, or insecurities over the well-being of another. It is to ignore the voice of conscience in favor of expediency. And while the betrayer may initially believe they've escaped the consequences of their actions, the reality is far less forgiving. The human psyche is not designed to live in harmony with betrayal. Guilt, shame, and regret are inevitable companions to such acts, and they have a way of surfacing even in the quietest moments. But let's consider for a moment what it means for the person on the receiving end of betrayal. For someone with a good soul, the act of being betrayed often feels like an assault on their very essence. These are people who see the best in others, who invest their time and energy in nurturing relationships, and who believe in the inherent potential for goodness within humanity. To betray someone like that is to force them to question not only the trust they placed in the betrayer, but also the principles that guide their own lives. It introduces doubt where there was once certainty, and it plants the seeds of cynicism in a heart that was once open and hopeful. This is a tragedy not just for the individual, but for society as a whole. Good souls are the bedrock of healthy communities. They are the ones who inspire others to rise above their base instincts, who act as examples of what is possible when we live in alignment with our higher values. When such people are betrayed, the ripple effects extend far beyond the immediate relationship. The betrayal diminishes their capacity to trust, to give, and to believe in the goodness of others. And in doing so, it diminishes the collective potential for connection and understanding. Yet, within this pain, lies an opportunity for growth and transformation. Betrayal, as devastating as it is, can also serve as a crucibly a test of character that forces us to confront the truth about ourselves and others. For the betrayed, it is a chance to reevaluate the people and values they hold dear. It is a moment to reclaim their agency, to decide how they will move forward, and to choose whether they will allow the betrayal to define them or to strengthen them. This is not an easy process, but it is a necessary one. Healing from betrayal requires not only time, but also a willingness to face the pain head on, to grieve the loss of trust, and to rebuild from the ground up. For the betrayer, the path to redemption is equally challenging. It requires an honest reckoning with their actions and their consequences. It demands humility, the ability to admit wrongdoing and to seek forgiveness, not as a way to absolve oneself, but as a step toward genuine reconciliation. This is where true accountability begins. It's not about erasing the past, but about learning from it and making amends in meaningful ways. Redemption, in this sense, is not about being forgiven by others, but about realigning one's actions with their values and striving to live in a way that honors the trust they once betrayed. The price of betrayal is a heavy one, but it is not insurmountable. Both the betrayed and the betrayer have the capacity to emerge from the experience with greater clarity and strength. For the betrayed, it is an opportunity to reaffirm their commitment to living with integrity, even in the face of pain. For the betrayer, it is a chance to confront their flaws and to strive for a higher standard of behavior. In both cases, the journey is one of growth and transformation, a process that, while painful, can lead to a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. And this is where the true power of a good soul lies. A good soul, even in the face of betrayal, has the ability to rise above the hurt, to learn from the experience, and to continue embodying the values that make them who they are. They do not allow the betrayal to define them or to dictate their actions. Instead, they use it as a catalyst for growth, proving that goodness is not a weakness but a profound strength. This is the ultimate triumph over betrayal, not merely surviving it, but transforming it into an opportunity to become even more aligned with the principles that guide a meaningful life. When betrayal occurs, especially when directed at someone with a deeply compassionate and principled character, the resulting pain can feel insurmountable. It cuts deeper than the surface, wounding not just the heart but also the foundation of trust and belief in others. A betrayal of this magnitude isn't simply an act of breaking a promise or breaching confidence, it's an assault on the unspoken agreements that bind human relationships together. For a person with a good and moral soul, betrayal is not merely a momentary lapse of judgment by another. It becomes an existential crisis, forcing them to question their values, their instincts, and the very nature of human connection. The good soul operates from a place of giving, often to the point of self-sacrifice. This is not born of naivety, but of a conscious choice to uplift others, to make the world a slightly better place, one interaction at a time. They are the ones who listen when no one else does, who offer their help without expecting anything in return, and who see potential in others where most see flaws. They believe in the inherent goodness of people, even when evidence suggests otherwise. This belief is not a weakness, it's a profound strength. It requires courage to see the best in others, to offer vulnerability in a world often dominated by cynicism and self-interest. But what happens when this courage is met with betrayal? When the trust they so freely give is abused, it shakes them to their core. The betrayal doesn't just damage the relationship, it threatens their worldview. How can one continue to believe in goodness when faced with such stark evidence of its absence? This is the agonizing question that a betrayed good soul must grapple with. And it is here, in this moment of despair and questioning, that the seeds of transformation can be sown. The instinctual reaction to betrayal is often anger, followed closely by a desire for retribution. These emotions are natural, and to deny their presence is to deny one's humanity. There is a difference between acknowledging these feelings and being consumed by them. To act out of anger is to perpetuate the cycle of harm, turning oneself into the very thing that caused the pain. But to sit with that anger, to understand it, and to let it pass without letting it define one's actions, that is the mark of true strength. A good soul, even when betrayed, retains the capacity for resilience. This is not to say that they should forget or excuse the betrayal, far from it. Forgiveness, if it comes, must be genuine and not a forced gesture to ease tension. But resilience is about something deeper. It's about the ability to endure hardship without losing sight of who you are. It's about maintaining your values even when the world gives you every reason to abandon them. Betrayal tests this resilience in the most profound way. And for those who rise to the challenge, it can lead to an even greater understanding of themselves and their purpose. For the betrayer, the consequences are equally profound, though often delayed. At first, they may feel justified or relieved, rationalizing their actions as necessary or unavoidable. But the human psyche is not built to endure the weight of such dishonesty indefinitely. Guilt and shame are not merely social constructs. They are deeply ingrained mechanisms that remind us when we have strayed from our moral path. Over time, these feelings fester, manifesting in ways that can erode one's sense of self. The betrayer may find themselves trapped in a cycle of denial and regret, unable to reconcile their actions with the person they want to believe they are. Yet redemption is always possible. Redemption does not erase the betrayal, nor does it guarantee forgiveness from the betrayed. But it is an essential step for the betrayer to reclaim their integrity. This process begins with acknowledgement and honest and unflinching acceptance of the harm caused. From there, it requires a commitment to change, to act in ways that restore trust and demonstrate genuine remorse. Redemption is not about words or apologies. It is about consistent actions that align with one's professed values. For the betrayed, healing is a journey, not a destination. It requires time, patience, and often the support of others. It involves grieving the loss of trust, reevaluating boundaries, and learning to navigate the world with both wisdom and openness. The temptation to close oneself off, to harden one's heart as a means of self-protection, is strong. But this path, while seemingly safer, leads to isolation and bitterness. The true challenge is to remain open to risk vulnerability again, even when it feels like the last thing you want to do. This is not about being naive or ignoring the lessons learned. It is about choosing to live authentically, even in the face of pain. And the price of betrayal is paid by both parties, albeit in different ways. The betrayed suffer the immediate pain, the disillusionment, and the loss of trust. But the betrayer must live with the knowledge of their actions, with the weight of guilt, and the understanding that they have damaged something precious. Both have the potential to grow from the experience, but only if they face it with honesty and courage. A good soul, even in the face of betrayal, holds an unshakable truth. Their goodness is not dependent on the actions of others. It is a reflection of their character, their choices, and their commitment to living with integrity. Betrayal may wound them, but it cannot define them. And in rising above the pain, in continuing to live with compassion and purpose, they demonstrate the true power of a good soul, a power that no betrayal can ever take away.